more books on the jihadi generation, basically, the infiltration of the Hamas Muslim Brotherhood organization into the United States. And there's some videos out there, and they're free on that first table there. So if anyone wants, if you want to get more briefed on exactly what the Muslims are doing here, what their intentions are, what they're demanded to do by the Quran itself, if they're following Islam, they may be peaceful now, but when the order comes in for them to take over, then they will do what they're supposed to do. Because for them, it's a death sentence if they don't. They're considered to be as a kuffar, someone that's just as bad as us infidels. So anyway, time to be a watchman. So we're going to talk about what the Bible has to say about that, and I think this is something that we all should just really try to embed in our heart and be thinking about someone that we are kind of hesitant maybe to approach, but someone that needs us to talk to them. Son of man, I've made thee a watchman into the house of Israel. Therefore, hear the word of my mouth and give them warning from me. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, you shall surely die, and you do not warn the wicked from his way to save his life, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood I will require from your hand. Pretty serious stuff. And then yet if you warn the wicked, and he turns not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but you've delivered your soul. Again, when a righteous man does turn from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him. Isn't that interesting? When we have the ability to have a close walk with God, and we rebel against him, maybe we're angry that something didn't turn out right, and we rebel, then a stumbling block. He allows us to drift, and it's time for his brothers or sisters to come to him and warn him, right? He shall die in his sins, and I think all of his righteousness which he's done shall not be remembered. That's not the way any of us wants to go down. But his blood will I require at your hand. Nevertheless, if you warn the righteous man that the righteous sin not, and he does not sin, he shall surely live. But because he is warned, also you have delivered your own soul. So is it worth it to have that uncomfortable conversation with someone that you love, or someone that is rather abrasive and abrupt? I just had a friend of mine tell me just yesterday I needed to have a conversation with somebody, and then I have to go to this and be convicted. So James 5:19, brethren, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his ways will save a soul from death and cover a multitude of sins. So that's what's been laid in front of us, and this is our responsibility. Jude 1:22, and this was Bill used this verse, and some have mercy who are in doubt. Think about that, the people that are not sure, and some save, snatching them out of the fire. And on some have mercy with fear, hating even the garment spotted by flesh. And we all know that there are some people that are so involved in sin right now that we almost hate to reach out to them. But we were not saved to be silent. I think about the fact, I really feel strongly that God initially called the nation of Israel to be his chosen people, but they were supposed to reach out, right? They were supposed to influence the world for him. And then here we are, we have that same opportunity that he gave them. Short-sightedness, unable to focus, and blind to reality. This is what we see in every society when people refuse to see the threat or see what's happening around them and refuse to get involved and intervene and do anything about it. I like this picture better. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I think about that. In every society, we have individuals that would choose to stick their head in the sand and pretend it's not going to affect them. By the time we acknowledge it's going to affect us, it's probably too late. So let's talk about a hard subject, but a reality that I see today. Beware of false ideologies. Vladimir Lenin said the goal of socialism is communism. And I'm going to stand here and say, We are a socialist nation. And the way that I know we're a socialist nation, we're called a democracy now. Everybody says democracy. Our founding fathers never intended for this to be a democracy. They said that they created a constitutional republic. And that way the power was in the people's hands, not in government, but everybody says it's a democracy. And let's see what our founding fathers said. Thomas Jefferson said a democracy is nothing more than mob rule where 51% of the people may take away the rights of the other 49. Are you seeing any mobs lately? Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide. Turns to communism. John Adams. Benjamin Franklin said democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch, and liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. And Alexander Hamilton, we are a republican government. Real liberty is never found in despotism or in the extremes of democracy. So we were given a republic, and just a picture of the struggles that have gone on our soil and all over the country, all over the world, in order to try to preserve our freedom and to keep us a republic. And so I didn't know about this monument until just last year. And so I ordered a replica of it. It's pretty small. But this is the monument to the founding fathers that early pilgrims actually erected in memory of the sacrifices and the purpose that our country was created for. It's 81 feet high. It's the tallest monument, national monument that we have. And so on the top is faith. It's located just really close to where the Mayflower 2 landed, and right outside of Plymouth, Massachusetts. And this faith, she has an actual piece of the Plymouth Rock underneath her foot. She is pointing to heaven. She's got the Star of David on her chest, and she's got the Geneva Bible in her hand. I forget which one that is. So, and she's trying to point everybody, that's what created our country. That's what made it great. That was the dependence that our founding fathers had. Underneath it is morality. Morality has, she has the 10 Commandments from the Old Testament, and she's holding the scroll of Revelation, so Old and New Testament. And hold on a second, I got to get my cheat sheet out because I always forget. I don't want to leave anything out. But underneath her seat are two replicas. Whoops, I got on the wrong page. Hold on a second. Underneath her seat, she has I'm going to get over there anymore. Sorry about that. She has the reliefs under her seat are the prophet and the evangelist. They were intended to keep our faith. And then the law. This guy's in a thoughtful pose with the civil law, and underneath him is justice and mercy, which should be part of our law, initiated. And it's all based on biblical principles. And the third one is education, a young woman holding the book of knowledge and teaching from it. And underneath it is youth and wisdom. So it's pretty spectacular to me that this is what they credit our founding fathers with giving us in this country. But I have to say, when I get to education, I think if you have education and you don't have faith, and you don't have morality, and you don't have law, you are cheating the generation that's being taught. And that's where we are in America today with our youth. They don't know any of those things. They don't know the history of our country. They don't know about our founding fathers. They don't know about faith. And the last one is liberty. And this guy's got his sword is in a sheath. On the right hand, his left hand is holding onto a broken chain, signifying that, despotism is finished, and he's got a lion's paw over his shoulder where, the lion has been conquered, and he's able to have peace. And so I think this is, if you haven't ever seen this before, like I hadn't, it's worth just visiting the website and realizing that we were given this, and these early settlers actually wanted us to know what we've been given. I can't remember the date that it was erected, but it took 70 years to get it erected. They worked on it for 70 years before they completed it. So that's the monument to the forefathers. That's what I think we need to be teaching. We need to be recalling. Be we need to be letting everyone know that we know what God has given us and why we have freedom. So let's go back to communism. I've already been there twice before, accidentally. But this was from Vladimir Lenin in 1921. He said, how to destroy the West: corrupt the young, get them away from religion, encourage their interest in sex, make them superficial by focusing their attention on sports, sensual entertainments, and other trivialities. Always preach true democracy, but seize power as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. Encourage government extravagance, destroy its credit, produce fear with rising prices, inflation, and general discontent. Encourage disorders and foster a lenient attitude toward disorders. Seen that? Boy, didn't we see that during Black Lives Matter. By spacious argument, cause the breakdown of the old moral virtues: honesty, sobriety, self-restraint. Cause registration of firearms to leave the population defenseless. So how are we doing? We're really headed there, and this is the results. These kids are happy, they're boisterous, they're prideful. Trump is the symptom, capitalism is the disease, and socialism is the cure. And this was actually, this poster came from Socialism and Liberation Organization, which is a Chinese Communist Party organization based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So if you want to know what their plan is, this has been taught, it was taught at KU for a while, Rules by Saul Alinsky. It goes back to the 1960s. It is dedicated. The Inside Deal actually dedicates his book to the first anarchist, and that was Satan. Thank you for bringing that to my attention, because it's true. So if you start to pick this up, and I did when someone handed it to me before I got on a plane one time, and I went, oh my word. It is, well, and it was for Obama as well. So this is how you community organize. This is how you get individuals that they make fools of themselves. They're useful idiots for communism. So, and Nikita Khrushchev in 1959 said, your children's children will live under communism. You Americans are so gullible. No, you won't accept communism outright, but we'll keep feeding you small doses of socialism until you will finally wake up and find that you already have communism. We won't have to fight you. We'll so weaken your economy until you fall like overripe fruit into our hands. So I think that, just a couple years ago, we saw money pouring into our pockets, money pouring out of, so quickly, and with the intention of ruining the economy of our nation. And they were doing a pretty good job. It was a real fast leak. And so I'm glad that we've got some people trying to restrain that now. But, we're pretty close to where Nikita Khrushchev expected us to be. And here's a video, and I think this is by Frank Gaffney, I think. You know, Morningstar Ranch is only just a small part of the, you know, the fragment of how much communism is buying up our farmland. They they're in getting involved in our energy, and they've already found computer chips in some of our solar energy. I mean, they can shut down our grid, not by an attack on the grid, but by just from over there remotely. They can take use their computer chips and shut us down. So this has become a real serious issue, and we just Americans tend to be too trusting for one thing, and the second thing is we might be a little bit greedy in regards to if you offer us money, we will not even think about what we're doing and how we're endangering other people. So this is what was on the Communist Party website the last time I looked. I just decided I'd copy a couple of pictures that I thought were pretty relevant today. Migrants welcome here. We don't care what your criminal background is. We don't care if you're bringing young children in here for sexual um, servitude or anything like that. We want as many people across the border as possible. We want to dilute the culture of America. And then, of course, standing up for the Palestinians and the individuals, the very individuals that burned babies alive, took hundreds of people captive, slaughtered people mercilessly. They actually have absolutely no heart. And yet our college campuses have been so deceived. And I think a lot of that is because the Muslim Brotherhood has been proven to be a Hamas organization. That was, and the Muslim Brotherhood Student Association was the first Muslim Brotherhood organization that started in the United States. They went after our college campuses first. And then you can actually Google Access Islam, U.S. Department of Education, and you will find programs to teach Islam in a positive way to school students. And how many people have done that? In Wichita, I got notified that there was a charter school that this little boy came home. He was in third grade, first day of third grade. And when he had gone to school, his first day of school, they had the 5 pillars of Islam on one wall. Do you remember that, Wayne, being in the news? So it covered one wall, and they were going to teach the 5 pillars of Islam to the students. And he came home and he was crying to his mother. He said, I thought that the Muslims wanted to kill us. And she said, yes, we're Jewish. They do want to kill us. So I found out about it, and it ended up making the news, and it was taken down. But, I mean, people are so deceived. When I carried legislation that would outlaw foreign law or Sharia law in the state of Kansas, and I took my idea to the revisers. His name was Jason Long at the Capitol, and I said, I want to outlaw foreign law in our court system and just have American law accepted, because that's Article 6 of the Supreme, our Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And the response from him was, oh no, I took a course at K-State, and Sharia law is very compatible with the Constitution. And I said, well, who taught you? Oh, an imam. So, I mean, this is what we're facing today, the deception. This is a bright guy, but he wanted to get his CEUs, and why not figure out if Islamic law was, and no, it's okay, it's completely compatible. So my only, more people with their heads in the sand, right? They don't know what they don't know, and somehow we need to make sure they find out. So we are told Islam means peace. Islam actually means submission. And they are supposed to bring everyone under submission. They are supposed to dominate They are not supposed to coexist, but they will make friends with the people who believe in coexisting. You know, it's kind of funny because I was once at a conference, and I think it was Boston or something, and they were protesting me and the groups that were inside the building, and police were there and everything. And Ryan Mara, who was one of the speakers, he said, "Wonder what they're protesting." I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, let's go out and ask." So we did. We just walked out there, and I walked out to this lady, and I said, "So tell me, what are we doing out here?" She said, "Well, we're protesting the people inside." I said, "Well, who are they?" She said, "They're haters." I said, "There's haters in there?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "What do they look like? What's a hater look like? I don't know how to identify one when I see one." And she says, "Well, I don't know. I just know that there's a bunch of haters in there." And so she said, "I'm a loving person." And she said, "I'm Muslim and I love everybody. And I have all kinds of friends." And I said, "Oh, you love everyone." I always wanted to talk to a Muslim. I think it's really interesting because Muslims own a lot of land, a lot of territory, a lot of countries, right? And I just, don't you think that they would be okay with the Jews having just a little country the size of New Jersey to live in, since they're a minority? I said, "What do you think about that?" And she was just, it just kind of, what could she say? It was kind of fun. But anyway, so these guys, us with our head in the sand, and then them outside the U.S. Capitol. May Allah destroy the Jews and the Christians. Quran 9:30. Cast terror and strike their necks and fingers. Quran 8:12. Islam must prevail. Quran 48:28. I often visit the fact that if Allah is so great, like they say He is, how come they keep losing wars? So, and then we're seeing churches burn. Uh, when Notre Dame burned a couple years ago, there was um, there was a video of a guy up on the top of Notre Dame where this fire started in a full white garb of a sheik, so Islamic wear. And so I always wondered, but of course nobody ever came out with that. Um, but we're seeing a lot more. And I recently, it's been a couple of years ago, I hosted law enforcement to come and hear Security Policy Center people talk about Antifa and how Antifa was changing their modus operandi. They had been, trying to get autonomous zones and that kind of stuff with Black Lives Matter and everything. And he said they are now going after churches. They're now going to go, start doing those kind of things. And University of Michigan in 2020, not allowed to wear a cross necklace on campus. Coach fired for praying with players. Teacher fired for giving Bible to a student. And social justice is all that matters. This picture with this guy standing up against a free speech zone. My husband John and I went to the Grand Canyon a couple years ago. And, that's an immense place. People were scattered all over the place, no big groups or anything, but we got to one spot and it said free speech zone. There was a sign. And I'm thinking, we were supposed to come all the way over here to have a conversation. I mean, it doesn't make much sense, but anyway. And then the Toronto School Board Superintendent reportedly canceled Yazidi Nobel Peace Prize winner Nadia Murad's book launching event because she has written a book being an ISIS sex slave, and it could foster Islamophobia. That's what we're seeing. Of course, we know that the Yazidis women were taken and they were actually sold in slave auctions as slaves. And once the Muslim purchased them to do anything they wanted with them, there was nothing, no boundaries. And she was able to escape and write her story, but for her to tell her story, she might make a Muslim mad. I remember, I don't know if you guys remember when a military guy in Great Britain was beheaded on the street, and I think it was a Somali male. and he was still holding the bloody knife and just standing there. And so they filmed him, saying, "Get used to this. This happens in my country. This is what's coming to America." And so at first, the prime minister said, "We're not going to condone this. In Great Britain, we're not going to condone this behavior." And then within a couple of days, he was saying, "Military people do not wear your uniforms in public. It makes them angry." So that's what's coming. So yesterday, or earlier today, I guess, it's just earlier today, I was talking about my friend Mark Powell, who had his church in Dodge City, Kansas, and he they kicked him out because he spoke against homosexuality. He just preached out of Romans chapter 1. But he did not lose courage because he ended up moving right outside Chicago, and he calls me and he says they're starting this Muslim youth camp for kids 10 to 15, and he sent me this, and I made a copy of it. He sent me this. He said they're teaching hand-to-hand combat. They're teaching the Quran. We've got to do something about it. And I said, okay. So, and then we had one conference call after that, and we were going to have a conference call the week later. So this is a red flag. They're training young people to be terrorists. And but I never heard back from him. And so I got on his Facebook, and you can get on his Facebook today. You remember his picture. He still has his Facebook page up there, but nothing has been recorded on there since May 8th of 2024. And then I got this strange phone call from this woman, and she said, "You keep on trying to get a hold of Mark Powell. Give up. He's dead. And there's no obituary or anything. Just give it up." And so I was kind of shocked. How can someone die? And she didn't give me a cause of death. How can someone die and you don't have an obituary? And why wouldn't he deserve to be remembered? And so I thought about the legislators that I spoke to, and I thought, okay, there was a legislator from Meade, Kansas, Ron Reichman Sr. I contacted him and I said, "Did you know Mark Powell?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Have you heard from him? Do you?" And he said, "I got this strange phone call from this woman telling me to stop trying to get in touch with him because he was dead." And he said, "That's all I know." I called the local police chief in Dodge City, and they were going to do an investigation. I never heard anything after that. But, all I can say is Mark Powell, he did not get discouraged. He was a watchman. Even though, he got shut down for speaking truth in his church, he was ready to stand up against this outside of Chicago. So I don't think that we should weary in well-doing, I guess. This is Ilhan Omar. She's a Somali. And in my country, I'm forced to keep my mouth shut, which is true. But here I'm free to talk trash about this country in hopes I can change it to a country where I'm forced to keep my mouth shut. Islam is not a race or religion. It doesn't have a color. It's an authoritarian culture. It's a doctrine that imposes itself by force. When you were talking about the Ottoman Empire, they forced conversions across much of Africa and Europe, and got to, right on the outside of Spain. And I mean that they are, it calls to kill those who do not believe, and so it's a cult that glorifies death. And so here's something that kind of shows some of that right now. That's Hamas right there. I just want to, this, just seeing that just now just reminds me. I mean, remember the four horsemen of the apocalypse? Remember the pale horse? It doesn't really say pale. It's a pale green color, but horses aren't green, so we don't, they don't say that, but it actually stands for the pale green color that brings war and death follows it. And I believe that that's Islam. I believe that one of the four horsemen. And it's interesting whenever I was watching, and she was talking about Egypt when she was talking about we stage a revolution, at the other side of it. She was talking about Egypt when they rose up and they were standing in, wasn't Tiananmen Square, but what was the name of that square, and they were fighting, and the Muslim Brotherhood won, and they right away started burning churches and killing Christians. And then the military took over. But I was watching the demonstrations there on television, and it was the strangest thing. There was an image of a green horse with a horseman on it that was just, it looked like smoke. It was in the shape of a horse, and it looked like it was being led, and then it just kind of went up and dissipated. And they didn't even know it when they just announced, and then they went back and showed it again because they saw this and they didn't know how it had been created. But you can still Google, pale horse of Egypt, and you can still see it. And it really ties into me that I think that Islam might be a very big portion of what we see toward the end of because there's such a big population, and they are so adamant on winning, and they know how to war. Right now, they're friends with communists, they're friends with LGBT, they're friends with Black Lives Matter, they're friends with Antifa, any group that agrees with them to destroy America or Israel. Israel's got the same kind of people over there that we have here, same battles that we're having over here. Anybody that will agree with them, they'll go along with that, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So someone mentioned, Chrislam, the ecumenical movement. This was created, this Pope Francis actually announced Chrislam, and they built this center in Dubai in 2022 to unite the worlds into one religion. How's that going to work for you? I want to show you Black Lives Matter. This is the fist of Marxism. Social justice bell ringers has the same Marxist fist for middle and high school students. They teach for activism, political thinkers, writers, they teach Marxism, social justice, middle and high school students. Here's the Marxist fist again for a George Floyd riot that occurred in Allen, Texas in 2020. And every time they would have the riot, and they could put this out over, I can't remember, there was one of those, you get on the internet for certain sites, and they would display, but before people would get there, there would be pallets of bricks and gallons of water and milk ready for them to go ahead and do the damage and looting. And here he says, bringing weapons, we'll be assaulting cops. My brother's bringing a Molotov. We're going to start stuff on fire. We're going to be looting. I mean, they just say exactly what they're going to do, and they're doing it again. George Floyd was a guy who was not angelic by any means. He was not worthy of anyone standing up and having a riot. He was actually dying from an overdose of drugs. But they just wait for a tipping point. And for this, right now, there's going to be a demonstration tomorrow here on 6th and Merchant. Oh, at Fremont Park now. Wow, you hear that? And so that's the No King. They want to have a large number. And I know when we were trying to get the Value Them Both passed, there were individuals that were coming from across the country, whenever they would organize a demonstration or anything. And so I expect, and I saw Black Lives Matter did something in the Capitol when I was up there, and I went up to this guy. He had a big old camera, and I said, "I've never seen you before. Where are you from?" "California." "Oh, wow, you came all the way here for one little demonstration." So anyway, that's what they do. They want to intimidate. They want to, and I think we've got some people that are going to be just driving by with Trump signs and the American flag. So. Yep, they want anger there. Well, that shows that yet we're the haters. I just can't figure that one out. Yeah. So let's have a look at Black Lives Matter for a little bit. These are the 3 women that actually started Black Lives Matter. All 3 of them are LGBTQ, RSTUV, WXYZ. So, and plus, Patrice Cullors at the top was she was the executive director. She's now a real Marxist they're really ideologue. They really think she's great. Elisa Garza, who's in the blue, she's married to another woman. Opal Tomati is the 3rd one. And so but their demonstration and everything always turned out to be more for homosexuals than for the blacks. And the interesting thing is, when they did do demonstrations for the blacks, they were burning down black communities. They were harming their own people. It didn't work out too well. They raised a lot of money, and Patrice Cullors ended up buying 2 big mansions for herself, and they both went in white communities because she didn't think the black communities were safe. So, but I'll just let her speak for herself here. So that kind of tells you what they planned on doing. I mean, I think they want to eliminate our local law enforcement. They want a national law enforcement that they can control. They would like to have the black shirts like Hitler had. We see satanic abortion clinics coming up now. Unbelievable. Of course, at the Democrat convention, they had free abortions for women. This actually gives women an opportunity to have a destruction ritual with their abortion when they take their child's life. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in New Mexico and Virginia. This is something that we need to take seriously. Revelation 12:17, and the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. We need to be aware of false prophets, and there are a bunch of those right now. I love this one. There's so many. The end of the world, I mean, Al Gore made a lot of money selling global warming while he built a house on Malibu, which was supposed to be underwater by 2010. But they just keep postponing the inevitable. Benny Hinn is a false prophet. He's admitted that he lied, that he was fraudulent. He called himself a man of God, and he is now worth $60 million and has a $10 million mansion in California. Joel Osteen, which is prosperity. There's a lot of those guys there. Don't talk about sin, just get their money, and he does not address sin. He's worth $100 million in 2020, probably more than that now. I got invited to go. Some of my friends were actually really following this. They called him a prophet, and he was speaking in Topeka. I went up to listen, and I was going, he just came from Oklahoma. I mean, there was just so much hype about it. I couldn't help but think, I wonder if he told Oklahoma the same kind of prophecies. I think he's got canned prophecies. He just goes from one state to the other and tells each one the same thing. And then when he said, okay, it's time to fill up the till, and he holds this basket up and he said, everybody, stand up, put those $100 bills up there, wave them in the air, and come up and put them in this basket. And I was just going, that's not what the Bible has told me to do. I mean, we're supposed to give in secret. I mean, how? But it was just, and women were standing up there, and they were just marching down there with it. They were so used to doing it, and I thought it was tragic. So, but that's what they do. They are all hype and no depth. We've got a lot of magazines that have a lot of hype too, and a lot of false information. We cannot trust our news media any longer. It's been bought and paid for, and I pronounce his name Joseph Goebbels, but I'm not sure, okay. And but he was the propaganda minister for Adolf Hitler, and he said, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So, let's think about that. I mean, when people started getting canceled, and I had a hard time. I knew a lot of people that got their Facebook pages taken down. We weren't politically correct. They wanted to protect from the lie. And I remember Al Gore, the person who invented the internet, to which we're all grateful. I mean, but that didn't go over. So then he went to global warming. And then, everybody admitted that it was a cooling cycle. So now we're in climate change. I don't know when climate change will end. I think that's been going on since the beginning of time. But yeah. So dishonor and deceit are the devil's hands and feet. So that's why they ridicule us and they lie. Try to make us ashamed. Try to make us feel foolish if we don't believe in global warming. Try to make us feel foolish if we don't accept the science. This is Bella Dodd. She actually defected from the KGB, and there were several of them that did. Yuri Brezhnev and I think his name was Whitaker Chambers. But she said the Communist Party operates by infiltrating and subverting social institutions like the churches, the schools, mass media, and government. And we've seen it in every arena. So we're going to go back again to another Eric Metaxas. And I'm not crazy about Eric Metaxas, but I just happened to have these and they said the truth. So I just wanted to. So, I mean, that's just kind of thought that was worthwhile for us to hear that the reality is, and I just remembered whenever I was watching that, seeing some of the things, the rituals that Black Lives Matter would do when they had some of their uh, protests and everything. Patrice Cullors, who was the head of that, she would take a bottle of water and she would pour it out and say their names, call up the names of the dead to fight with them. That's demonic. And this is Trevor Loudon, who's an expert on communism. So it's now, World Economic Forum or Davos, and I think they just changed their names, didn't they? Since the guy who speaks weird stepped down. But it's here. It's been going on for quite some time. The infiltration of communism, the infiltration of Islam, especially during the Obama administration and also the Biden administration. When Biden was running for president, he had an ad where and I've got a copy of that, where he was saying, "If you elect me," and it was for just specifically for the Arabs, for the Muslim population. "If you elect me, I promise I will put Muslims at every level of my administration." And so uh, that's they've been selling on the tube for a long time. So when we talk about false prophets, I would have to look at our colleges and our professors who I don't, it's hard to believe that they're actually that ignorant, but they definitely are very angry and very liberal. And the second picture is a picture of a man getting dressed up as a woman to go teach at a school. And when I started trying to find a picture in regards to that, I couldn't find very many decent pictures. I couldn't believe what those people that want to cross dress and be teachers, what they will wear to just go way overboard, and then hopefully, people will get angry at them, and then they'll fight for their rights and keep their job. And then, of course, the librarians are bad. I just asked someone who's now running for the governor's position the other night, okay, our libraries are state libraries. As a governor, are you going to control what goes into the children's section of the state libraries? Mm-hmm. It does. Well, I don't know if it's had an event today, but I know that they have a lot of material. Yesterday, wow. So let's look at the consequences of ignoring sin and ignoring God. Galatians 6, 7, and 8, do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth unto his own flesh, so shall of his own flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth unto the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap eternal life. So we've got to make sure that we're sowing into the right things, and we've got to make sure our loved ones are sowing into the right things, because corruption is not very pretty. And so know the word, be a watchman, be in the word. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. In John 8:32, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And free is a good place to be. I always like to close with this guy because he's my favorite. George the Dragon Slayer. Uh, he was actually killing a Muslim. So one, never tolerate evil, for first evil is tolerated, then embraced, then hailed as being good, then it becomes unlawful to do what is actually good. So we don't tolerate it. We've got to let people know we don't tolerate it. And it's the end. If you don't mind, I'd like to pray. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you again for the people that have come here. I pray, Lord God, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart has been acceptable unto you. Lord, I for the hearts of people here, I pray, Lord God, that we will all understand the importance of being united in Christ, that we all understand that you have called us, and we know that we are at war. So, Lord God, guide and direct our hearts and lives, and help us glorify you in all that we do. Give us the courage to speak truth to those, even hard truth to those that make it difficult. So guide and direct us. I pray these things in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.